So we're gonna go ahead just a little short half hour again since it is New Year's. I don't know what people
Oh,
are doing, but it is gonna be a little short. We will resume our regularly scheduled program of an hour starting next week, and then to the end of the year for 2025. But it is the glorious January 1st, 2025. A lot of great things are gonna be happening. Hopefully, a lot of great things. So how are we doing today, everyone?
Doing good. How you guys doing?
Hanging in there.
feeling good, feeling great.
All right. So we're just gonna go ahead, start, go for half hour, yap for how long. But as I did mention last week, we are going to be talking about an idea that is not solidified in our political spaces, and it's not even a notion that you would talk to other people about. This is more of an observation I made when I was reading both the Theory of the Leisure class and this book. Oop, dropped my Benjamin. This book right here, The Theory of the Business Enterprise, and both of these books are by Thornstein Veblen, an American Marxist, but the Marxism that he practiced, preached, and taught wasn't. Um, it was a economic theory, but it wasn't on the production side. It was on the social side. Is how human creatures developed as a social creature, as a social being, that is the driving force in a particular society. In the development of human history as a historical and conditional context, it is social being that drives society. Now, I err on the side of Marx. It is the production side, the industrious side, the laborious side, the owning the means of production side that drives society as a production. But we must not glance over Thornstein Veblen when it comes to explaining our social phenomena, because as much as Marx gets right, there's a lot that Marx gets wrong. And what the Marx gets wrong, Thornstein gets right, and whatever Thornstein gets wrong, Marx gets right. So we're not all right, we're not all wrong. But there's a lot to take when we consider our Marxists in the previous generation, in the past time. So I specifically bring up Thornstein Veblen in talking about today's topic, inconspicuous production. It is like a mirror or some sort of like it's like a another observation on his take on conspicuous consumption when we talked about last week. Making it very obvious that people consume, right? Making it obvious that it's for a social status that people consume. So people produce first, but for the purpose of production is to consume and make it shown that you consume, right? People first produce the Mercedes, and then you, the individual, then consume buy the Mercedes, and then show it off. That is the reason why people do stuff in a society. Conspicuous consumption, as Veblen articulates and describes. Marx, however, describes society built on the contradiction forces of production, the owning and the means of production. Who owns like the factories? Who owns the tools, the resources? Right? What behind the state, or I guess like state-backed protection? Who owns this stuff? Right? That's kind of the Marxian side of political theory. Thornstein Veblen, and where we're going to be diving into deeper, is social phenomena. So this is by no means like solidified political theory you'll go talk about, and I'm like one big Marxist Leninist and I know exactly what I'm talking about. Of course, all our observations are made of the material observation so that we can understand our material conditions better. So this is not the one perspective to like hone down and know and understand. This is just one of the many perspectives that we can provide to people trying to help understand the material conditions. So without further ado, inconspicuous production as opposed to conspicuous consumption. So when we conspicuously consume, we do it so obviously, right? Big house, nice car, white picket fence, nuclear family, basically. In the American society, the U.S. Imperial Core, your conspicuous consumption is going to look like that white picket fence, the Mercedes or BMW or whatever. It's like some foreign car, big house, mansion or whatever, and then your beep, your Supreme, your hype beast clothes, or like it doesn't have to be hype beast clothes. It could just be expensive clothes. So you can go out on the streets or at a venue or a party or wherever, and then be like, yeah, this shirt's like $5,000. It's a Kirkland, so it's not, but $5,000 shirt, $2,000 shoe, like a lot of the means of consumption. So that's conspicuous consumption, showing that you can consume, but also as like a reading in between the lines, showing that you have the means to consume. Now, in inconspicuous production, you still follow the same themes and schemes of that inconspicuity and as opposed to the conspicuously, the obviousness, there is a lack of obviousness when it comes to production. In a liberal society in which Thornstein crafts the theory, where Marx crafts the theory, which is a bourgeois society, inconspicuous production presents to us, I don't know how this phone works, my wife. I don't know how this phone works. I don't know how the screen turns on when the button turns on. I just know that it does, right? When I want to swipe up and go on my phone and do whatever, I don't know how it does that behind the scenes on the code in the back end. I just know that it does, right? So the same thing with the automobile. I'm a mechanic, so I'm very familiar with the car, so it makes me easier to explain stuff like this. So in inconspicuous production, right, as a mechanic, it's not so inconspicuous. I know a thing or two about a car. I know how to fix a car, but obviously not everyone does, right? Not everyone knows how to fix a car or anything knows about the inner workings of the car, the internal producing of the car. So we don't think of cars or anything like that as producing, but they are producing a movement, they are producing a comfort, and they are producing a value at which is consumed. So the inconspicuous production layers under that conspicuous consumption, right? We don't know how most of this stuff works, right? No, I wouldn't be able to go up to anyone and have them tell me how a car works, from how the air enters the air, the intake, and then the fuel injector injects the fuel into the combustion chamber, which combusts, which then pushes down a piston, goes down the output shaft in the transmission. All of that stuff, right? Inconspicuous production is that not knowing of how stuff works. And it's not a bad thing. There's a lot of stuff in this world that we don't know how it works, and it just does, right? The webcam that is showing my face right now, I don't know exactly how that works, video capture, whatever. The audio that you're hearing coming out of your device to hear me listen to me, that is inconspicuous production. It's just understanding how every single phenomena in your material condition works exactly. So inconspicuous production is that lacking of knowing how stuff works, how the automobile runs with the gas when you put it in, how your phone turns on when you click a button, or when it's like you're bringing it up to your face. Inconspicuous production, how stuff works. And then we talk about the production side of, economic theory. So inconspicuous production in this sense is alienation. So alienation, of course, is that idea, or is that observed phenomena of where the individual laborer is removed from the products of their labor. So individuals aren't with the products that they make. Like the chair maker goes home at the end of the day making chairs, no chairs in hand, no paycheck in hand, right? Unless it's that given Friday every 2 weeks or a month or so, whatever. But the individual laborer is not working towards, at the end of the day, something they could take home. So inconspicuous production breaks up and divides labor. I don't know if we're familiar with that notion, the observation of division of labor. That's a very big thing in Marx's economic theory. So the division of labor is like taking a entire process, like so the laptop that we're speaking on right now, this whole thing. There's a lot of parts that go into making that laptop, right? So not everything is made in one factory, and not everything is made in one place. Not everything is mined and resources harvested from the same place, because labor itself is a resource that is harvested, quote unquote, right? There is metals, ores, and such that is harvested to make the laptop. So in its earliest stages of production, in dividing the labor, right, you have the miners of the ore, right? So as we talk about the mining of the ore, Congo, of course, for the smartphones, for anything that uses cobalt, really was almost everything. So inconspicuous production, though, the individual is removed from understanding that our ores come from literal miners, excavators and diggers, people laboring literally themselves to mine and extract the raw resources from the land, so that eventually they can be refined into the laptop, into the iPhone, right? Inconspicuous production is that I don't know how any of this stuff works. I just know that it does. I don't know how this book was made. I just know that I'm reading it now. I'm conspicuously consuming. I'm showing you what I'm consuming, but I have no idea how this book was made. Inconspicuous production. There's always two sides to everything, right? Our little Christmas tree that we hung up because we didn't have enough space, a little paper thing. Inconspicuous production. There's not much inconspicuity about this. You know exactly how this could be made. But when it comes to the stapler now, right, what kind of machines were used to make a product like this, right? The construction and the quality of how this was made. Probably don't know anything about that, but we do know that it does staple stuff, and that's why I got it. So inconspicuous production, conspicuous consumption, these two notions and ideas go hand in hand. They're like one and the same. but it all falls under the foundations, all falls on the foundations of your contradictions, of your relationships, your discernible observations that you can make just by looking at things. So when you look at things, we talked about this a while ago. The two phenomena, throw and forward. And I use these day to day to help understand the material conditions that we live in. So in throw, just for a quick recap, in throw is basically a visual representation of throw. You knew there was a book there. You knew that was something there. Now this is forwarding. We're going to talk about the book, Theory of the Business Enterprise by Thornstein Veblen. And there's a little cityscape right here with some words right here. The author name and title, and then there's like a little summary on the back. So now you let it know a little bit more about the book. As firsthand before, right? You barely saw it, but you knew that was something there. Inconspicuous production is that, hey, there's something there, I just don't know what it is. That's your thrown understanding of the material condition. Your forwarded understanding of the material condition is now understanding what this book is exactly, how it functions, what it is, and whatnot, and how it exists in the material conditions in relationship to you, or in relationship to the external conditions as well. So not this book, not just to me, but to the room as well, to the laptop, to the position that it is right here in front of the, on the table. So we have all of these interacting forces and whatnot. And there's a quote in here that I would like to read. And it goes about how things exist in the material condition, how people do stuff, and how everything is intertwined. Because not everything just comes up out of nowhere. Maybe I go find it. But everything always has an origin, and we can understand themselves, or we can understand it through understanding the external material conditions. So this is not quite exactly the quote I wanted to pull up, but this is a very important quote to understand where we're talking about the existing material conditions and understanding how stuff works. And then we're going to talk about it a little bit. So the quote reads as follows: "It is not simply the apparatus reshapes the materials reshape themselves by help of the apparatus." And this goes into Hegel, all the way back to Hegel, understanding that the material conditions is simply just a particular rearrangement of the material condition. So everything that we see is just a rearrangement of how things work in the world. So nothing, as we know from science, or material sciences, matter is neither created nor destroyed. It just is there. And when we talk about existential philosophy, stuff is just there, right? We can explain their beings to the material sense, right? Atoms, quarks, gluons, and then we go up a little more to scale molecules, cells, and then we go up a little more, blood vessels, right, for the human, and then organs and such, and we go up a little further, the human. All right. There's a lot of layers to everything that we do and exist as. So the rearranging of the material conditions is exactly what's happening every single second of every single moment in time. When we burn food, you didn't destroy the food, you just changed its state to a non-edible form that we wouldn't want to eat. You can still eat it, but you're not destroying anything, you're not making anything, you're not, materializing any new matter to change the state at which it exists in. You are basically changing or rearranging the material conditions in perception, in what you see, in what you observe, in what you understand it to be. So burnt food goes from edible to burnt real quick. Just leave it in the oven for a little bit longer, but you're not destroying anything. You're basically just changing the state at which stuff exists in. And this is this understanding to get past the inconspicuous production. It's understanding how stuff works. I'm always a big preacher of not understanding what to think, but understanding how to think, understanding how stuff works. So when we understand what to think, it falls under the reactionary schemes of life, right? The conspicuous consumption scheme of life. It's where people just go out, consume, understand what to do, and then go out and react to everything as they come upon encountering it. It's a very tiresome, say, loathsome lifestyle to have, right? You're always antagonistic of your material conditions and basically everything around you. It doesn't help the individual, develop themselves in a society. And it doesn't know any better than the individual not understanding inconspicuous production. I don't know how anything works, right? Go up to anyone, how does the electoral college work? Wouldn't be able to tell you. How does the president get elected? You'll probably give you a half-assed answer. Inconspicuous production is not just in our production, not in our economic philosophies and our economic theory. It's political as well, right? Everything is connected. So not everything is isolated. And I wrote out another quote too. I'm barely into this book, but I love myself a Thornstein. But nothing is isolated. Everything is connected, and that comes through our misunderstandings of the inconspicuous production. Right? Not everyone believes that everything is connected. People think stuff is isolated. Things like are inherently separated. Like you can talk about politics, but you don't have to talk about this in the same space, right? When you go out or when you're talking to someone, and people say, "Oh, that's not connected whatsoever. That has nothing to do with either or," when in fact it pretty much, very much does so. So everything is connected in our spaces. Now, I didn't get too far into this book, so I don't know how I'm not hard finding these quotes. So let's see. I didn't even highlight it. I just did the whole paragraph. So I'll just read the paragraph. Let's see here. Where do I want to start? A disturbance at any point, whereby any given branch of industry fails to do its share in the work of the system at large, immediately affects the neighboring or related branches, which come before it in the sequence, and it is transmitted through their derangement of the remoter portions of the system. So that was a lot of mumbo jumbo. Remember, this guy was born in 19 or 18, 60s, 70s. Then he wrote this in 1912. A lot of big language there. But basically, everything is connected. Nothing is isolated. If they were talking about specifically the industries of a society, so like textile making, cherry or horse stables, livestock, basically all of the 1912, early 1900 industries, like horse carriages, printing presses, your industries of society. Now they would be considered tech. You could go to transportation, private jet. There's a lot of agriculture, still agricultural societies, industries. So they're basically saying, for example, if the industrial agricultural inner workings were to fail somewhere inside of its where water couldn't get water, water's bad, or like the crops weren't growing, it would affect another industry inside the same society. So let's take the U.S. imperial core. If food, or if agriculture and food were to suffer, somewhere along the lines tech would suffer too, because tech people need food to eat. So nothing is isolated, right? Even the most remote industries that we would think of, oil rigging, would somehow affect streamers who game. It would, because eventually, the down the line of the sequences of your industries, in which every single one has a part to take and play with each other, right? What at one point does the oil rig shutting down affect a streamer or gaming? It will eventually, because oil runs a lot of things in society, right? If it's unrefined, there's a lot of many applications for oil to be used. So, namely, trucks and transportation, cars, trains, and stuff like that, or oil. So, somewhere along the lines of logistics, it will affect the streamer who games. That there's somewhere along the ways of this roadmap that the oil industry has been disrupted. Somewhere out here, transportation, shipping, logistics, and then like food characters, a safe way here or there, and then finally your streamer. Right here, it's all connected. It just takes time understanding that things are connected. And that is where we get our inconspicuous production. How does an oil rig affect a streamer who is streaming in the UK? You don't know until you start connecting the dots. But you have to understand where to connect the dots. Everything is connected in the industry. And as we all know, this very famous saying, we all know it, follow the money. And wherever the money goes, that's where the rub is at. So we understand how our material conditions exist through our example, how stuff is connected. But in the acts or in the ways that an industry fucks up, it will be felt in rippled effect through the entire web of industries in a society. And we could take this and understanding of how we build our coalitions as well. Because as we understand, coalition building is not that I'll say effective in the liberal society. It's not an avenue great for individuals in a society who think hyper individualism, hyper consumption, all of these things in a society that everyone must do themselves, privately, individualistically. So coalition building in the society is quite hard, quite difficult. But when you do get it, you hit it, it does feel great. But we have to understand what we're combating against, what we're fighting against in our coalition building understanding. Inconspicuous production, and then a few weeks ago we talked about alienation and anti-intellectualism. Just umbrella term, like the umbrella term for this entire thing. Capitalism basically is that fall. At the later stages of capitalism, as Lenin says, imperialism, because capitalism is just your markets inward, or in a given society, imperialism is your markets outward. is how you get your resources appropriated, colonized, imperialized on other nations outside of your borders. So the U.S., of course, is no mystery to anyone that they are meddling in foreign affairs everywhere in the world at once, at the same time, to gather resources for the imperial core, for the U.S. agenda, for whatever it may be. But we understand that our conditions are connected, right? So why does it matter that the U.S. is out there on foreign lands? It affects us, contrary to popular belief, but it does affect us. Inconspicuous production, of course. How does it affect us? Draw the lines, draw the dots, right? It's more immediate when we're talking about the U.S. imperial core. It's the U.S. We live in the U.S., therefore it affects us. It doesn't matter if it's in the borders, domestic, or international, outside the borders. It's gonna affect us, right? Because we still live in the same nation that does that stuff, right? We are associated by citizenship that stuff happening. Doesn't mean we endorse it, of course, but we are going to be affected by it. So we have to understand, of course, and this comes up in a lot of my notes, a lot of my articulations, revolutionary intercommunalism. You know, everything is connected, intercommunally, globally, everything is connected. Doesn't matter how isolated you may be. It doesn't matter how isolated a tribe may have never been contacted with a human, right? A lot of the stuff that we do emits a lot of carbon emissions. That tribe somewhere out there in the world is going to get affected by global warming, and they wouldn't understand why. Inconspicuous production, not by fault of that village or that tribe. It's just simply that they don't know. That's just how it is, and no fault to anyone. That's just how it is. And understanding that, it's like you let your conscience off just a little bit. Just understanding that things are the way they are because they are. But that shouldn't stop us from understanding the forwarded understanding, the material conditions understanding of of our spaces. So we have to understand forward and throw at the same time. Our conspicuous consumptions, how we consume, and our inconspicuous productions, how stuff we don't know, how stuff works, right? So every given moment and every single second, that light is emitting photons out of its bulb so that you can see my face because the lights are bouncing off into the camera, and then it digitizes that photo or that, the video, and then it shoots it out onto your screen, and then you can see me. That's how that works, kind of. I'm not an expert, but that's that alleviating of the inconspicuous production, right? So we're not supposed to be experts in everything. We're not supposed to know everything. That's a little bit ridiculous. But understand, like, not being surprised how stuff works. An inconspicuous production and the critique of that is basically just understanding how stuff works, right? Rather than just not. Like conspicuous consumption, you just consume, but you don't know how stuff works, right? Do you think the person who brought a private jet, the billionaire, knows how the jet works? No, they just conspicuously consume while inconspicuously, not knowing that production side. It's inconspicuous production. And they don't know how a jet works. They just know that it goes up in the air, takes them from Paris to L.A., and that's all they know. That's all they know how, like, what goes on. That is that inconspicuous production. That is that alienation of the understanding of how stuff works. That labor, the removal of labor, right? That leisure class, the bourgeois class. I don't care how stuff works. I have the means, aka I have the money. Just give me what I want. Right? The consumption, the conspicuous. I want to consume. I don't care how stuff works. Right? So when it's a side note, but when people go to college, they're not developing skills for themselves. People go to college to develop skills for a corporation or a business, because the entirety of the U.S. or the higher learning, he has a whole book on higher learning. Higher learning institutions, especially in the U.S. education system, the U.S. Imperial Core, is there for businesses, not for a particular industry, but it's for a business. It's there to procure a profit out of the so with trade work and like minimum wage work and work that is considered, I don't want to say it, unskilled. Of course, all labor is skilled, but to the denotations of what people, these bourgeois individuals talk about, right? The low paying jobs, right? It's all still classified as labor, even if you were to do it out of college, if you were to get a degree. It just so happens that your labor is considered more valuable, that, bourgeois and other ruling class individuals will pay you more for that labor, which is a little bit ridiculous. But higher learning institutions and U.S. education system is designed to churn out workers, right? To churn out people who know what to think, but never know how to think, right? The what schemes, the reactionary schemes of life and that thinking is very embedded within the liberal arts or the liberal societies and colleges, right, of our domain, of our peoples, of our U.S. right, Turtle Island, and everything. Everything is layered with that liberal scheme: freedom, raw, America first, freedom, equality, every man is equal. And I know there's a quote that Karl Marx, jurted out, as he says stuff, we all say stuff. Karl Marx says a lot of stuff too. The U.S. education system, oh, just had a brain fart. Completely forgot what that quote was. But we're talking about Karl Marx. So then he was talking about higher education, higher learning. No, I completely brain farted. So we're going to go back to Thornstein Veblen, what he had to say about higher education system and the higher learning. It follows the schemes of devout observances, Thornstein says, and talking about higher learning. So we're talking about higher learning, secondary, like colleges, like 4 year, and then your master's, 12 years, your doctorates, your higher learning, the dedication to a craft at which the individual expresses and exerts themselves so that there's a consumption or attainment of exquisite knowledge, and this exquisite knowledge is therefore used as an articulation of a labor. So like the exquisite knowledge of like learning surgery for a doctor, not everyone can do that. It's a high labor skill, it's a high value skill, right? When we talk about mechanics, I'm a mechanic, I fix cars, right? I have exquisite knowledge in this field, right? I can exert myself to this repair or to this diagnosis or whatever that other individuals may not, right? So it's just what the individual knows, how they're able to apply it is what people get to do and interact in a society. So we're coming up on that half hour, right? New Year's and such. We're gonna go a little recap. So we talked about conspicuous consumption just a little bit, inconspicuous production, how stuff works, but not really, right? You know what stuff does, but you know how stuff works. So like, how does a bulldozer doze with its little like shovel like everywhere? You know, you see it be done. How does a plane fly in the air? You see it be done, right? How does the stove turn on and stuff like that? Just ask yourself questions about the material conditions and just understand it just a little bit. You don't have to be an expert in everything. That's not what we're here to do, be an expert. But understanding our material conditions to break down that anti-intellectualism, to break down that alienation, because everything is connected. And the more divided we are, not just in our labor, but in our other aspects of society, of course, divided we fall. So we have to understand that everything is connected, but you don't have to be experts in everything. We just have to understand that, yeah, that has to do with something. We just have to find out, how many degrees of separation is something related to something until we, cross that bridge. So it is at that lovely 4:30 mark. We will be back next week with a 1 hour beautiful session. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I'm going to read more into this, and I'll probably talk about some of this, because this is an entire critique. This is like a mini Marx Capital Volume 1. It's very tiny compared to that. But it basically talks about business enterprise, of course, the enterprise, the profit motivated enterprise. So there's a big distinction. I think we talked about it before, but like this is the book that really goes into business versus industry. I might go over a little bit right now. I'm a little geeked about it. I love talking about business versus industry, the profit versus passion motive, as I like to call it, because the profit motive is basically just extract as much labor as you can without having to care about the industry. And then, of course, the industry is there to produce for a passion. It's people want to do stuff because they want to do stuff. A coalition of people want to make chairs, and all they do is make chairs, and they find satisfaction in it, and they love doing it. That's an industry. People who do that want to make chairs. Then let them make chairs. Let them do whatever they want with those resources, so long as it, of course, benefits society. And everyone does. Everyone got an ass to sit on. Chairs are useful, but there's a problem when it comes to business. Business is that leech. It's like here. I am the chair making business. I am the leech. I am business. I am leeching off of your, produce surplus value. And then all of a sudden, all that surplus value is gone. It's like, the industry is dead. I wonder how this happened. It's a weak industry. It's no longer a viable, profitable industry. It's because it's been sucked dry. We see this a lot in gaming. I see a lot in gaming. I see it every day. It's pretty bad. You see it in every industry where business comes in. Hey, I'm a boardroom full of execs. How can I make money off of the people who are just trying to enjoy life? Oh, just go into a popular industry, make it into a business, have it be profitable for us, and then never reinvest it back into the industry. I think we found ourselves a good business plan, and that's basically what a business is. Every time someone says a business is there to help a society develop, create jobs, and do whatever, There's always a layer. It's always founded on the schemes of competition, the schemes of savagery when you go out and conduct a business, because there's a layer of exploitation that happens when you produce under a business, right? Because there exists this profit motive, and the profit motive, it takes away from the labor not being paid back that surplus value, that profit motive being procured out of whatever business that you're leeching on of an industry, because industries exist first as people exist first. When people do stuff, right? That is when business have been able to pounce on, because businesses don't do nothing themselves. Businesses now are the ultimate leeches. Out of the businesses, I don't like myself a good business. Industry though, that's where it's at. However, like this right here, like I just reached out to Decolonization Covenant. It takes them a week or two to get back, but that's an industry. It's not a for-profit motive, right? People are still getting paid and resources are still being spent in the way they're supposed to do. But you understand the cause at which is being helped when you are, paying into that service or that product. You know exactly what is going in for the cost. You know exactly the people who you're helping out. You know exactly what, everything that comes with the purchase price and, the buying of a product from an industry, much different than buying a product from a business. Because a business, there's a layer. There's always layers to everything. And there's a layer on the consumer side where it's like, I know I'm giving my money to a business, right? I'm not giving my money to the cashier themselves personally or the small business owner personally. Like the owner's not in the room. The owner's not in how. The CEO of Walmart's not in every single Walmart, right? Ringing up everyone. That's a business, because a business is competitive, savage, the schemes of savagery, autonomy, but autonomy that is harmful to the human. So a lot of great stuff. Love talking about theory, business, enterprise, profit, and all that. But that is the half hour, a little bit over. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Thank you, Day and Iris, for being here. Love you guys a lot. I will be upgrading this in a little bit somewhere, hopefully before next week. So I appreciate you. I know it's a short half hour, but don't worry. 1 hour sessions will be back full force for the rest of the year, 2025. A very exciting year. Very exciting for the zines too. I've been reaching out to people in the local area. No one have gone back to me yet. But of course, it's the new year, so I wasn't expecting anyone to get back to me yet. But there's a lot of zines that have been making. We did get approval from the Black Panther and the Panther Party, so we can start saying, oh, this is also another Brown Bolshevism is just another organization that's reaching out. They also haven't gone back to me. But memes on zines, those zines, a very exciting year for zines. So I know I said it a bunch of times, but thank you so much for being here. It will be leaving now. So, hour sessions later, every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time on, the Discord. So, thank you. Inconspicuous production, conspicuous consumption, understanding of material conditions. Just be patient. Just love your people, right? Just understand that people have frustrations. That you can't do anything about that. That's all the historically conditional events that brought them to that point. Our point up to that, after that, is just to help people out. It's just to help people understand where the position of where they're sitting at. Because we can't change people, but we can attempt to change the material conditions around them, which will then, of course, change the people. So if our words aren't enough, then our actions will be. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate you. Love you. See you next week. I'm going to end the call now. I said it like 20 times. Love you guys.